welcome to English Vibes Hub, the ultimate destination for improving your English skills. I'm Emma, and I'm excited to be here today with Liam to talk about something that can be really challenging for English learners: mastering conversations at the airport. From checking in to boarding, there are so many opportunities to practice your English, but it can also be overwhelming. So, Liam, have you ever had any difficulties with airport conversations?
Actually, yes. I remember one time when I was traveling to the US, and I had to ask for directions to the gate. I was using a phrasal verb to head to, but the airport staff didn't seem to understand me. It was a bit frustrating, but then I realized that I could use a simpler phrase, "Where is gate?" and it worked like a charm. It just goes to show that sometimes, using simpler language can be more effective in getting your point across.
That's such a great point, Liam. Using simpler language can definitely help to avoid confusion. And speaking of phrasal verbs, let's talk about a few that are really useful when traveling. One of my favorites is to check in. It means to register or confirm your presence at the airport, usually at the check-in counter. For example, I need to check in for my flight before I can drop off my luggage. Can you think of a time when you had to use this phrase, Liam?
Yes, I use it all the time when I travel. Another phrasal verb that comes to mind is to pick up. It can mean to collect something, like your luggage, or to give someone a ride. For instance, I'll pick you up from the airport at 5 p.m. It's such a versatile phrase, and it's used in so many different contexts. What about you, Emma? Do you have a favorite phrasal verb that you use when traveling?
I do. I love using the phrase to drop off. It means to leave something or someone at a particular place, like the airport. For example, I'll drop off my luggage at the check-in counter. It's so convenient, and it saves time. And let's not forget about the idiom to make a connection. It means to transfer from one flight to another, usually at a different airport. For instance, I have to make a connection in New York before I can get to my final destination. It's such a common phrase, but it can be tricky to understand if you're not familiar with it.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to practice using these phrases in context. When you're at the airport, you don't have time to think about what to say or how to say it. You need to be able to respond quickly and confidently. So, let's practice using some of these phrases in a conversation. Emma, can you start by asking me a question about my travel plans?
Sure thing. So, Liam, what time is your flight, and do you need to make any connections along the way?
My flight is at 10 a.m., and I do need to make a connection in Chicago before I can get to my final destination. I'm a bit worried about the layover, though it's only 45 minutes, and I'm not sure if I'll have enough time to get to the next gate.
That does sound a bit tight. But don't worry, we can practice using some phrases to help you navigate the situation. For example, you could say, "Excuse me, can you tell me where the gate is for my connecting flight? Or how long will it take to get to the next gate?" Let's try to come up with some more phrases like that.
That's a great idea, Emma. And what about if I need to ask for help with my luggage? What phrases could I use in that situation?
Well, you could say, "Can you help me with my luggage, please?" Or "Where can I find a luggage cart?" We can also practice using some phrases to ask for directions, like "Where is the nearest restroom?" Or "Can you show me where the departure gate is?" Let's keep practicing and see how many phrases we can come up with.
Sounds like a plan to me, and I think it would be really helpful to listen to some examples of real-life conversations at the airport. Do you have any recordings or examples that we could listen to and learn from?
Actually, I do have a few examples that we can listen to. Let me just pull them up real quick. Okay, so this first one is a conversation between a passenger and an airport staff member. They're discussing the passenger's flight and the best way to get to the gate. Let's listen and see if we can pick out any useful phrases or vocabulary.
I'm all ears. Let's listen and learn.
Great. So, as we listen to this conversation, pay attention to the phrases and vocabulary that the passenger and staff member use. See if you can identify any phrases that we've discussed so far, like to check in or to make a connection. And let's make a note of any new phrases or vocabulary that we come across, so we can practice using them later.
Got it? I'll be taking notes as we listen. And maybe we can even pause the recording at certain points to discuss what's being said and how we can apply it to our own conversations.
That's a fantastic idea, Liam. Let's get started and see what we can learn. And don't worry if you have any questions or need clarification on anything. We'll take it one step at a time and make sure you feel confident and comfortable using these phrases in your own conversations.
Thanks, Emma. I'm feeling more confident already. Let's keep going and see where the conversation takes us.
Sounds good to me. And remember, the key to mastering conversations at the airport is to practice, practice, practice. The more you practice using these phrases and vocabulary, the more confident you'll become. So, let's keep practicing and see how far we can get.
I'm excited to see how far we can get, Emma, and I'm sure our listeners are too. Let's keep the conversation going and see what other useful phrases and vocabulary we can discover.
Absolutely, Liam. And don't forget to stay tuned for the next part of our conversation, where we'll be discussing even more phrases and vocabulary to help you navigate the airport with ease.
I'm looking forward to it, Emma, and I'm sure our listeners are too. Let's keep the conversation going and see where it takes us.
So, Liam, let's dive deeper into the topic of mastering conversations at the airport. What do you think is the most challenging part for non-native English speakers?
For me, it's got to be understanding the different accents and dialects of the airport staff. I mean, you've got people from all over the world working at airports, and it can be tough to catch what they're saying, especially when they're speaking quickly.
That's a great point, Liam. And it's not just about understanding the staff, but also being able to communicate effectively with them. For example, if you need to ask for directions to the gate, you might need to use a phrasal verb like pick up, as in, can you tell me where I can pick up my boarding pass?
Exactly, and another phrasal verb that comes to mind is check in. You know, like when you arrive at the airport and you need to check in for your flight. It's a really common phrase, but it can be confusing for non-native speakers to understand the difference between check-in and check-out.
Absolutely. And speaking of checking in, I have a funny story about the time I forgot to print out my boarding pass and had to go to the check-in counter to get it. I had to use the phrase sort out to explain the situation to the staff, as in I need to sort out my boarding pass. Can you help me?
I can imagine how frustrating that must have been. But it's great that you were able to use the right phrase to get the help you needed. And that's a great example of how using the right phrasal verb can make a big difference in a conversation. Another phrase that might be useful in this situation is turn up, as in I didn't realize I needed to print out my boarding pass, but I can turn up at the gate and see if they can help me.
That's a great example, Liam. And I think it's also important to talk about the importance of active listening when communicating with airport staff. You need to be able to listen carefully to what they're saying and respond accordingly. For instance, if they ask you to go through security, you need to understand what that means and follow their instructions.
Absolutely. Active listening is crucial in any conversation, but especially in a fast-paced environment like an airport. And it's not just about listening to the staff, but also to the announcements and instructions over the loudspeaker. You need to be able to keep up with what's being said and follow the instructions.
Exactly. And to help our listeners practice their listening skills, let's do a quick role play. I'll be the airport staff and you can be the passenger. We can practice using some of the phrasal verbs we've discussed, like pick up and check in.
Sounds like a great idea, Emma. I'll start by asking you where I can pick up my boarding pass.
You can pick up your boarding pass at the self-service kiosk over there. Just scan your passport and follow the instructions on the screen.
Okay, got it. And then what do I need to do to check in for my flight?
Once you have your boarding pass, you can proceed to the check-in counter to drop off your luggage. Just make sure to arrive at the gate with plenty of time to spare, as security can take a while to get through.
All right, that makes sense. And what if I need to sort out a problem with my flight, like if it's been delayed or canceled?
If you need to sort out a problem with your flight, you can go to the customer service desk and speak with a representative. They'll be able to help you figure out what to do next and provide you with any necessary assistance.
Okay, that's really helpful to know. I think our listeners will really appreciate this role play, Emma. It's making the conversation feel more real and relatable.
I'm glad you think so, Liam. And I think we've covered some really important phrasal verbs and phrases that our listeners can use in their own conversations at the airport. Let's keep the conversation going and see if we can come up with some more examples.
Sounds like a plan, Emma. I'm thinking about a time when I had to turn up at the airport without my passport. It was a real nightmare, but I managed to sort out the problem with the help of the airport staff.
Wow, that sounds like a stressful experience. But it's great that you were able to resolve the issue. And it's a great example of how using the right phrasal verb can make a big difference in a conversation. I think we're just getting started on this topic, and I'm excited to see where the conversation takes us next.
Me too, Emma. I think we're just scratching the surface of what it takes to master conversations at the airport, and I'm looking forward to exploring more of these topics with you and our listeners.
Absolutely, Liam. And I think our listeners are too. Let's keep the conversation going and see what other insights and examples we can come up with. Absolutely, Liam. And I think our listeners are too. Let's keep the conversation going and see what other insights and examples we can come up with. Now, I'd like to talk about a situation where you need to check in at the airport.
That's a great point, Emma. Check-in is a phrasal verb that means to confirm your attendance or registration, usually at a hotel or an airport. For instance, I need to check in for my flight before I can drop off my luggage.
Exactly. And after you check in, you'll probably need to pick up your boarding pass. This phrasal verb means to collect or gather something, like your pass or luggage. You can say, I need to pick up my boarding pass at the self-service kiosk.
That's right, Emma. Another useful phrasal verb is turn up. It means to arrive or appear at a place, often unexpectedly. For example, my friend turned up at the airport just as I was about to board my flight.
I see what you mean, Liam. And what about set off? This phrasal verb means to start a journey or leave a place. You can say, we set off from the airport at 8 a.m. and arrived at our destination a few hours later.
Great example, Emma. Using these phrasal verbs can really help you sound more natural and confident when speaking English, especially in situations like traveling. Now, let's talk about some common idioms you might hear at the airport.
One idiom that comes to mind is on the move. It means to be traveling or in transit, often with a sense of urgency or purpose. You can say, I'm on the move and don't have time to stop and chat, but let's catch up soon.
That's a good one, Emma. Another idiom is in transit. It means to be in the process of traveling from one place to another, often with a layover or connection. For example, my luggage got lost in transit, so I had to buy some new clothes when I arrived.
I've had that happen to me before, Liam. It's so frustrating. But anyway, moving on to some final tips for our listeners. What are some things you think are essential for mastering English conversations at the airport?
Well, Emma, I think it's all about being prepared and practicing your vocabulary beforehand. You can listen to podcasts like ours, watch videos, or even practice with a language exchange partner. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
That's such great advice, Liam. And don't forget to stay calm and patient, especially if you encounter any language barriers or difficulties. Remember, it's okay to make mistakes. It's all part of the learning process.
Absolutely, Emma. And I think our listeners will appreciate the effort we've put into creating this podcast series on mastering English conversations. We've covered a lot of ground, from basic phrases to more complex vocabulary and idioms.
Thanks, Liam. I think we make a great team, and I'm so grateful to have you as my co-host. Now, let's wrap up this final episode with some encouraging words for our listeners.
Before we go, I just want to say that learning a language takes time and practice, but it's definitely worth it. Don't be afraid to try new things and take risks. You never know what amazing opportunities you might discover.
Well said, Liam. And to all our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in to English Vibes Hub. If you want to learn more about mastering English conversations, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more content.
And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date with our latest episodes and updates. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll catch you in the next one on English Vibes Hub.